Good afternoon, everybody. Let me switch this screen. Everyone should be able to see me. Once you are able to see me, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. This is our first time trying out a YouTube stream for one of these events. So if you are able, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat or say hi. You don't have to say full name or anything if you're just checking us out. We are on subscriber only mode, so please feel free to subscribe in order to chat in the chat box. There's no obligation to do so, but it would be nice to hear where folks are joining us from tonight. Also, if the audio's weird, if something doesn't make sense, feel free to let me know. Again, first time trying this on YouTube. Normally we host things on Zoom, but I think this would be a fantastic thing to try out. So again, if you are able to, please introduce yourself in the chat. I will get going. Otherwise, my name is Aiden Rodriguez Swanson. I am the statewide organizer for California Working Families Party. I apologize, my voice is a little off. I've been sick for the last week and a half and on the road to recovery. But you are here tonight to hear about the Welcome Gathering. National and a couple other states in the Working Families Party host their own welcome gathering. So I figured it'd be great to revive some of these on the statewide level for California, go over what it is that we are as a national party, and then jump into who we are and what we do here specifically in California. So again, we are in subscriber only mode, so if you are not able to chat, that might be why. If you're not logged into an account, that also might be why, but feel free to jump in at any time, ask questions, introduce yourself. Without further ado, and then I also think there's like emojis you can react with along the way. You can react to things in the chat or react to anything that's going on. So feel free to do so at any point. So without further ado, it seems like folks are shy tonight. No worries, that's completely fine. But these are some of the community agreements I wanted to go over really quickly. The three main ones that we're thinking are take space and make space. So what this means is if you're someone who is often not in the forefront of conversations, I encourage you to chime in, which is why I've been encouraging you to chat at any point of this tonight. I think it's really important to give space to folks who often don't feel like they're heard. And then on the flip side of this, make space. So if you're someone who always is a chatterbox, cool, that's great, fantastic for you. But if you notice that you are the only one chatting, feel free to take a step back and maybe see if someone else wants to say something. Don't think we'll have that problem here tonight, but anyway. The second thing is, this is more for when we did things on Zoom, but now this is in a different space on YouTube here. What happens here stays here, and what is learned here leaves here. Again, so whatever we talk about, if folks want to be vulnerable in the chat, or they choose not to be, if folks want to elaborate on things or not, let's leave that stuff here, and then take with us the knowledge that we are sharing with each other, and then the information I share about WFP as well. I think this last piece is probably the most important. Speak from your own experience in using I statements. So when I talk about things, I encourage folks to really say, okay, this is my own personal experience. This is my lived experience. This is what I have learned and encountered along the way. If folks were more active in the chat, I would encourage you to agree to these statements if you are able. If not, no worries, but please keep these in mind as we progress throughout the night. So basically, the main thing I wanted to cover is what we are as a party. The theory of change, the party we need, the party we're building toward. This is a really big fundamental piece of who we are as the Working Families Party. it really grounds us in the work that we do, and it really forces us to like be intentional and mindful of everything we do. So to really start us off, the first thing is our North Star. This right here is basically our guiding light to keep us moving forward. And that's basically to build a multiracial, feminist, working people's political party of the American left that wins governing power, and enact a structural reform agenda to save the planet and all the people on it. It is a mouthful. It is a bit of a tongue twister early on, but we have a specific thing in mind. So this big piece that we're focusing on is we are inclusive of, intentionally being inclusive of the multiracial and feminist working people's political party. Not only that, but we also strive to win governing power. This is something that you might not hear in some other spaces. Governing power itself is to really get into office and hold office and retain some of that power as we move forward into some of the, to enact a lot of the policies that we're working toward, and then to enact structural reform agenda to save the planet and all the people on it. That piece should not be too crazy to wrestle with, but this is our guiding principle. This is our North Star. So I think it is, for all of the pieces that we are working toward, this really succinctly covers our purpose. And I'm grateful that we have such a clean and precise way to convey this to folks. But that's not necessarily the reality that we're facing, and which is why the Working Families Party is really focused on becoming another major party in the United States, and specifically here in California. So we see a couple of main struggles here in the United States. Some of these to varying degrees, more in some areas than others. But one of the big things, and this is a pretty big piece that we've seen recently, is the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. This should not come as a big surprise to anybody who's been paying attention in the last couple of years. We've seen a hard shift to the right, a scary hard shift to the right, embracing fascist tendencies within the Republican Party. I'll elaborate this in a second, but we also see the Democratic Party is controlled by wealthy and corporate forces. I'll get into this a bit later and like how we're facing this in California, but this is something we are seeing as a main struggle within this country. Another thing is we are seeing Democrats losing working class people of all races. It's not just white voters that we're seeing. It is a large plethora of folks, especially here in California, where we are a majority-minority state. Working class folks of all races are leaving the Democratic Party for a variety of reasons. Some are going for Republican, some going independent, but we are seeing a dissatisfaction with the two-party system. And finally is, like I said, the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. Folks have heard probably about like the spoiler problem of running third-party candidates in very crucial elections. I think this is an important thing to be mindful of. So let's kind of jump into some of these main struggles in the US. The first, of course, being the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. This is probably the most easy to see in day-to-day political news, especially nationwide. We are seeing the party of Donald J. Trump as the party of white nationalism and white nationalists. This, we can go into the whole history of how we got to this point, but the important thing is we are here currently, and it poses a clear and present danger to not only minorities across the country and the state, but to large populations of the world. I mean, this extends to imperialism and colonialism, so really tying into those things is really scary and dangerous if it goes unchecked. And what this looks like in actuality is incitements of racial violence. The whole thing about this quote unquote wokeness that we're hearing about some boogeyman that the right is conjuring up about some thing that they probably can't even define if you ask them, honestly. But we're also seeing this as a way that folks are being restricted in the decisions that they can make about their bodies. We're seeing this Supreme Court. A lot of this is rooted, again, in the white nationalism. I don't want to get into the theory and like the history behind it, but we're also seeing a rise of theocracy. The Christian fundamentalism is a big piece of that. Open and brazen attacks on our democracy. It unfortunately is, despite their cling and claim that they are defenders of democracy, they are the most fervent in attacking it. We're seeing this play out locally in attacking the whole voting system, basically. Anyone affiliated and associated with correct voting, voting by mail, voting, electronic voting. Sure, there might be individual problems that folks have with these things, but to openly attack democracy as a way to keep and contain their power is scary. We're seeing violence against bars or any libraries, any location that hosts drag shows, and passing laws and legislation, or attempting to, that erase an entire group of people. Again, I don't want to focus too much on this, but it is important to know that this is a clear and present danger to our communities and the folks that we are hoping to protect and organize around. And then, unfortunately, we're seeing the folks that should be holding them accountable and fighting a lot of the time is the Democratic Party, and we're seeing that a corporate and the wealthy are taking over the Democratic Party, have been for some time, but they are good on a lot of social issues for the most part. It's when we get into economic problems and economic issues that we're seeing a unfortunate alignment between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So what does this look like? I mean, okay, they'll defend the basic rights, they'll say the right things, oftentimes with protecting Black, Latino, women, LGBTQ plus Americans. But then when it comes to changing the electoral system to make it more accessible to folks outside of the major two parties, or an economic and tax system, we see that the Democratic Party falls pretty closely in line with the fundamental beliefs of the Republican Party of let's not make changes, let's not shift and rock the boat. So again, I don't want to dive too much into the specifics of that. I want to get more into the California and how this is showing up here. But moving on from that, we are seeing, like I mentioned, the two-party system really limits our room to maneuver. As I mentioned before, we run into the perceived spoiler problem, where we as third parties can take away votes from Democratic or progressive candidates sometimes that we shouldn't, in that it allows Republicans or the conservative candidate to win. We don't want to fracture our voting bloc. The second thing here is it forces a strategic voting where we feel like folks can't be able to vote honestly on like who they really want to support because it's the quote unquote better of two evils that they're stuck having to pick between. And then the third piece is it heavily focuses and only really emphasizes the votes of the swing voters. And swing voters, for those of you unfamiliar with, are typically older, typically wider, and typically leaning more conservative. So it's important to keep those things in mind, that the two-party system is intentional about these things. It's not a bug, it's a gimmick of the system, as folks like to say. But again, we are seeing these four as the main struggles in the United States. But let's really focus on how do we see that the Democrat losing working class people of all races? I mean, this is a really important thing that we're seeing, and it's showing up in different ways. voters in Democratic strongholds, so a lot of the big cities, coastal cities, we're seeing folks deciding not to vote for a variety of reasons. We're seeing one of the interesting shifts was Obama voters, and then some folks having even voted for Obama choosing over time to shift more to the right and then ended up voting for Trump. That again could be the whole conversation around those things. And then I think one of the big things that we're seeing often is people just ignoring politics altogether. They're just checking out. They don't see this as something worth their time. They see the two-party system as folks uninterested in their issues. But where does that leave us, essentially? This is basically what folks think about when they think of political parties, especially here in the United States. They think of the Republicans, they think of the Democrats, and then you get the spoiler problems. That is the common understanding of what a political party is, and something that folks even ask us, like, hey, where are you all in this equation? But I want to take a sidestep to that really addresses the core understanding of what a political party is. And put simply, a political party is, I tend to think, these four things. It's people organizing together to do elections, and by do elections, obviously this means win elections, around a platform and governed by a clear ideology. So a political party has to basically include these four things. The Democratic Party operates around this. The Republican Party operates around this. A lot of other third parties operate around this. But I think this is the core four tenets of what make up a political party. And this is the definition that we like to use as the Working Families Party. Here is basically what we believe. And I will read this out loud, but I will never do a great enough job as Maurice Mitchell, who is our National Executive Director. He is a fantastic speaker. If you haven't heard him speak before, I really hope and encourage that folks are able to hear him speak at least one time. He's often all around giving speaking engagements, talking about WFP and the progressive movement. But I'll read this out here. So, in order to build the world we need, we have to dismantle racism and sexism. We need to build an economy that puts people on the planet ahead of profit. To accomplish any of this, we need a political revolution that will transform our government by taking power from the billionaires and warmongers and putting it in the hands of the majority of Americans. Now, this is, again, basically a Maurice's version of saying our North Star. I mean, it's not enough to just say, okay, we are governed by being progressive. Cool, we're progressive, woohoo. We have to have a clear understanding of what we are building toward and who are our allies and folks in this fight together. So I really think that this is a great quote, and then I'll be sure to find a time to hopefully get Maurice on one of these calls sometime so you all can hear him speak, because I think he's a phenomenal speaker, and I'm glad he's our executive director. But jumping now into where we are with California. We are a special space where we are notoriously known for being a blue state. I mean, folks all the time are like, oh, California's super blue. Yes, if you just look at the voting, like it's very surface level voting understanding. Like, you see the general election of the presidential race, Biden wins by a landslide. Trump, not so much. But then you get into smaller races. You get into things that are a little more not as clear cut for folks. And this is something we saw with Prop 15 at the same year. I mean, Prop 15 was Schools and Communities First. I mean, I don't want to jump into too much here, but we're talking about a progressive ballot measure. I mean, this is a progressive ballot measure that a lot of progressive organizations and activists were working on throughout the state. But if we compare the two pictures, this is the same election. This is the same time. So the general election itself, you see a large amount of blue. Those are votes for Biden. And then if you look at the blue in terms of the Prop 15 vote, this is where they got majority yes. this is a completely different story. And this is where we run into what we call the fish hook in California. Suppressed turnout, whether it's intentional or not, is one of the things that we're seeing. It reduces our margin of victory by hindering the amount of folks that we need to get out and vote. And this really maintains the right-wing strongholds in the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, and San Diego. Obviously, there are right-wing strongholds in some of the areas like the Bay, LA, and Orange County, but in terms of the amount of votes that we're seeing, these are the main places that they show up. So this is kind of the issue that we are taking on. It's not just, okay, we have a lot of blue voters, there's a variety to them, and not everyone decides to vote. Not everyone knows what to vote on specifically. So with that kind of as our foundation here, I want to take the chance to really introduce what we are as California WFP and how we are broken down. Because I think this really helps clarify for folks the different levels in which we operate on. So our statewide governing body, we have a chair, and so this is separate from staff and the folks that work there. So this is comprised of 3 different pillars: statewide labor unions, statewide community C4s, and regional charters. So what this looks like is, in California, we have 7 regional charters. I myself live in the Bay Area, but I'm a statewide organizer, so I organize and help out with things across the state. But these are our 7 regional charters: the Bay Area, Central Coast, Central Valley, LA County, Orange County, Inland Empire, and San Diego. If you are confused and a little curious about what your specific region you are in, you can one, ask in the chat. Feel free to ask in the chat too. And then the other thing is you can also just reach out to me at any time. And we have organizers in every area that cover these places. But with California being so large, it didn't make sense for us to have like a full just statewide body. We needed to focus on what things were going on locally and regionally. And these 7 regions made the most sense geographically to focus on how we wanted to build out our party. And within each of the regional charters, it's the same 3 pillars, but on the local level. So you have labor unions that are organizing in that area, you have community C4s, and then you have individual members. So this is where the average person in Party WFP, this is where they get engaged with the most. I don't want to read out everyone that shows up on this slide here, but you can take a look and see how many of these folks each of the areas made up of. So in terms of statewide organizations, I actually just realized this isn't the most updated version. There's an updated version recently where we got a couple more folks that joined the Bay Area and some in LA County as well. But as you can see, there's a lot of groups here. The statewide organizations sit on the statewide steering committee, and then the regional local organizations, these are the ones that operate on the local level and the regional level. Some do overlap, so you can see SEIU 10-1 is both in the Bay, as well as being a statewide organization. We have a lot of folks that we organize with, and so these are the folks that help set our priorities, that we organize with, that we kind of set our goals in alignment with, and we kind of help serve as the electoral arm a bit of helping folks that maybe don't have a robust C4 program maneuver a lot of this electoral work. But again, you can see some of the ones in your area. This does not include the individual member reps that are elected by the membership to sit on the regional steering committees. I just decided to leave the orgs here. But moving on, I wanted to kind of get into basically what we are hoping and looking to organize around in 2024. This, I think, is where we really shine the most. I think this is really where I think there's a lot of work that can be done and still needs to be done. So a couple things that I really wanted to focus on. And the first is, and this is in no particular order, it's expanded the state legislative squad. I'll get into what that means specifically in a bit. in 4 to 5 key races, and upgrade hopefully to Libs and Democrats in 2 to 3 more. So in total, hopefully three more squad members in the Senate and 2 in the Assembly. The LA, the Inland Empire and Bay all have big potential races. Maybe San Diego and Central Valley as well. Again, we also wanted to focus on the pipeline of development for local races and local candidates. One of the things that we see is by the time folks decide to run for state office, they have a lot of corporate and wealthy folks in their ear already talking to them about like, hey, you should move more to the center, move more to the right. But the more we support folks early on, whether it's school board or city council or water board or whatever it is, we want to make sure that we support them and back them up in case they want to run for higher office down the line as well. This is especially prevalent in the Central Valley, Alameda County, and then the Inland Empire. And then we also want to be mindful of the congressional things. We saw that the Democrats lost the House in this last election. We are working with the federal team to take back 2 to 4 congressional swing seats and expand progressives in Congress. The expansion of progressives in Congress is more, a couple of other states have that luxury a bit. California currently doesn't have a lot of progressive candidates running that folks would consider hardcore progressives, but we also see that the US Senate race is a big organizing potential. And we need to really beat Republicans in key regions. And fingers crossed we can get 1 or 2 opportunities to get a progressive in Congress. Again, this will take a lot of work. But I really want to focus now on the state legislature. This, I know, may look confusing and a lot, but I will kind of go over it briefly. So at the top, you'll see basically the gauge of this is the amount of change that folks are willing to do. Folks are looking at the systemic change, and you get reactionary on the naturally far right. Neoliberal is basically where we're seeing the Democratic Party operate around, especially here in California. So there are currently 28 corporate Dems, and we define corporate Dems as for folks that vote in alignment with what the corporations, typically their donors, the campaign donors, ask of them. And then on the right side of things, we get 18 Republicans. This is for the Assembly, and then all the folks that we bump up against in elections and campaigns. So the Big Oil, Apartment Association, the chamber, police officers. You can imagine the folks that we normally fight against. And then here on the left side, we have the amount of folks that are on the more progressive side. And then progressive, I would define largely as folks who really stand in alignment with some of the fundamentals of and with our North Star. Liberal may be that they are a bit uncertain on certain things. They are not as hardcore progressive as we would hope them to be, and they sometimes flip-flop. The list of these folks here, the 1 through 24, these are folks that we classify broadly as progressive. The ones that are in purple, highlighted in purple, are folks that are WFP endorsed. So these are the folks that make up our squad. The ones in green have open seats. So there's a bunch of progressive seats that are opening up in this upcoming election, and there's candidates already filing and running for those seats. Again, these are just this cycle right now. Things do bounce around and change. I've had to change the colors of some of these things various times throughout the last couple months as folks decide to run for other seats and whatnot. But as you can see, we have a solid amount of progressives and folks that vote along the progressive line in the Assembly. However, the speaker up there at number 2, Assemblymember Robert Rivas, Speaker Rivas, he is more on the liberal to neoliberal side of things. And without getting too much into how the Assembly handles things and passes legislation, we have seen what is often good progressive legislation start out introduced by our legislators end up being watered down. We got no hearings on a wealth tax introduced by Assemblymember Alex Lee. We haven't gotten a hearing, and it didn't pass the last time for universal single-payer healthcare by Assembly Member Kalra. A lot of the housing legislation was severely watered down. So we see that even though we have 24 progressive and then 10 liberal votes, 41 votes are needed for a majority. So that was some of the pickups that I mentioned before of like, hey, if we pick up more of these votes, we are able to get more folks into office and then get some of these folks to pass legislation that really benefits working class Californians. And then the same breakup happens on the Senate side as well. There's unfortunately a worse ratio here with 18 corporate Dems, eight seats, of course, opening up in 2024. Neoliberal at the top again with Governor Newsom and then Tony Atkins. And then here on the left side with 1 through 10, we see folks that are classified, as we would say, within the progressive side of things. Purple being folks that are WFP endorsed. This is again Senator Aisha Wahab, Carolyn Menjivar, and then Lola Smallwood Cuevas. The green is an open seat this upcoming cycle. So this is Senator Nancy Skinner in the Bay Area. And then we see, unfortunately, 3 of the major committee chairs are folks that are corporate Dems. And this is where we severely saw a lot of our legislation get hit hard. This is Senator Bradford, Senator Portantino, and then Senator Umberg. Each basically were responsible for gutting and really hitting hard a lot of our important bills that we were trying to pass, from environment to housing and rent control. We see that these committee chairs are folks that really hinder our progress. So hopefully, again, electing more folks, getting some of these corporate Dems out, and then picking up some more progressives really will make a big difference for us. And that kind of leads me to our squad. This is our squad for 2024. These are the folks that we've endorsed for the primary. This is not all of our endorsements for next year. We are likely going to endorse more folks after the primary, but these individuals on the right side on the graphic are folks that are the ones that we endorsed for the primary. So these folks are throughout the state for Assembly and Senate. This does not include folks that we endorsed in 2022 that became squad members because they are not up for re-election this coming cycle. And again, I mentioned those here: Senator Wahab, Senator Osmal Cuevas, and Senator Menjivar. But these folks are individuals that we screened. We got the endorsement questionnaires back, and then we had votes on and conversations around, like, are these folks that are going to stick to saying that they're progressives and really going to stay with that when they get into office? So those of our folks there. Now I kind of want to jump into what is it that we do within California WFP as staff and things along the way. So we host campaign camps. One of the things that we've seen is that folks, one, really enjoy these kinds of trainings. I think it is really fun that folks find these events enjoyable. So we recently had one in LA County, what was it, a week and a half ago now already, on October 28th with Councilmember Hugo Soto Martinez. This was for folks who wanted to run for office, folks who were interested in working on a campaign. We had a lot of these events tailored around folks who are brand new to this kind of space and really wanted to open it up to them to, like, hey, you don't have to pay a consultant to learn this information. These are things that we have just for anybody. 2 of the upcoming virtual sessions that I wanted to highlight are the campaign fundraising. Again, you don't have to be a candidate, you don't have to be announced. This can be just if you're generally interested, but the campaign fundraising one will be this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m. This will be hosted on Zoom, November 8th. And then the following week, we have a phone banks and door knocking session. So this is if you are interested in learning how to run a phone bank or door knocking session. It's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to put one together. It's another thing to actually do it and have one that's run effectively and something that you want volunteers to come back to. This again will be the following Wednesday, so next Wednesday, November 15th at 6 p.m. I encourage folks to really join these events, especially if you're just interested in helping out with campaigns at any point. I'm going to drop the link in the chat for folks who are interested. This has all of our upcoming events, including these 2 upcoming campaign camp events. We also are going to do more in-person ones in April. So if this is something that you are interested in, keep an eye out for that. If you are also interested, you can just name it in the chat, like, hey, are you going to do one in such and such region? We did one in the South Bay area, the week prior to the one in LA. But these are the ones that we have upcoming, the 2 virtual sessions. We also know that in California, we're facing a unique issue that a lot of other places don't find. This is unfortunately something that we're seeing as a weapon that the right and typically corporate forces are using to undermine the elections that we have. We saw this most noticeably with the recall attempt of Governor Newsom. Whatever you want to think about him, the recall process is being weaponized and utilized by folks who just disagree. And you get a small minority of folks being able to force these things onto the ballot to recall our progressive champions. And so we fought the recall in San Francisco against Chesa Boudin, the district attorney there. I was working on that race. So this, again, I will also drop in the chat. Any of the upcoming events that we have for Jesse Lopez, this is a race out in Santa Ana. The election for this is on November 14th. It is a special election. If you're not familiar with this, Jesse Lopez is a council member in Santa Ana. She was elected in 2020, and the Police Officers Association and corporate landlords are trying to recall her because they were not able to buy her vote on the city council. So what's recently come to light as well is that this election has been decertified by the Orange County Registrar of Voters, but the city council, half being folks that are in favor of the recall by not dismissing it, opted to keep the election ongoing despite being decertified by the Orange County Registrar of Voters. And this is because the votes needed were not met for this election. One of the things that we really saw was that the folks that were signature gathering for this used the incorrect district lines, and so they got the wrong amount of voters that were certified to vote in this election. So there's a decent swath of folks who should be voting in this election not able to vote for their council member to fight back this recall. So it's a complete mess, but we are seeing the recall things being weaponized, and California Working Families Party, along with some of our partner orgs down in Orange County, are really fighting back against this. If you are down there or know of folks down there, all of us will be down there on the 11th, which is this coming Saturday, to really fight back and canvass against this. So we also support our electeds when they are not in election season. One of the things that we really found useful for our elected officials is hosting town halls with them after they get elected. So we hosted, I just had 2 pictures here, one with Fu Jiang in Merced City Council, and then the other with Vice Mayor Lisette Espinoza Garnica in Redwood City. These town halls are really focused on bringing folks out to learn what it is that their council member, or in this case Vice Mayor, are working on. So we focused on youth health and safety, and then in Merced we were focusing on how folks can get involved with the budgetary process. But at the same time, we know it's not all just virtual spaces. We also like to have social events. So the 2 below here, one was in San Diego on the left side, and the bottom right is one that we recently had in Long Beach. these events will always be on our Mobilize, so feel free to check those out for the link that I dropped in the chat. So you should be able to see that still. You signed up for this event on Mobilize, which is how I'm assuming you found this. You can also check out upcoming events there. We update that often. So if there's anything that looks interesting to you in your area or is virtual, sign up at any time, share it with folks. We always encourage new folks, like I hope some of you all are here today, to join us. Like I mentioned before, we also wanted to focus on the congressional stuff. So we like to really bug and annoy the Republican Congress members who really ignore their constituents. I mean, it is no surprise then Speaker McCarthy and Congressman Valadao are not in alignment with the working class, not in alignment with folks in their area who are really struggling in the Central Valley. And so we host events and we host rallies and stuff at their offices, at their fundraisers, really highlighting for folks like, hey, you're not doing your job. So I think it is really great and important. We had the news show up at the one at Valadao's district office. The news just came in. We were just outside of Valadao's office, just like, hey, he's not listening to us. I forget what the specific legislation we were holding him accountable for at that time was, but any of these little things add up over time. It's like folks begin to see that their elected officials not in alignment with them. And as I mentioned earlier as well, we held I don't think I mentioned it earlier actually, but we held a Senate forum with Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Congresswoman Katie Porter back in May. This was held on Zoom, and we held watch parties for this across the state. It obviously says South San Francisco, but it's cut off there. But this was a great opportunity for folks to really get to know the two of the Congress people running for office there. Congressmember Adam Schiff was invited but did not attend. But these two spoke, and then months later, we ended up, the State Steering Committee ended up endorsing Congresswoman Barbara Lee. So we have endorsed her campaign there, but we really wanted to get folks out and interested in hearing about who their next potential senator could be. And now I really want to take the time to go over who is the California WFP team. As I mentioned before, Maurice Mitchell is our executive director. That's national, but here in California, our California state director is former supervisor in San Francisco, Jane Kim. Our senior campaign manager is Jorge Contreras, and then our senior federal affairs strategist, who is often working on the congressional issues, is Adam Gold. But the folks that you are likely to interact with the most, including myself, are all of us as organizers. I'm hoping folks can see my email address on there properly and nice. If not, I apologize, and I'll be sure to share it with folks afterward. But these are the organizers here in California. So again, I am a statewide organizer. We have Alicia Crater, who is the Bay Area organizer. She also runs our social media content. So if you see anything on social media of ours that looks fantastic, know that was Alicia. We also have Hannah Kessel, who is the Southern California organizer. She is based out of LA, that being LA County. Lauren Nguyen in the Southern California organizer, Orange County, Inland Empire, and San Diego. And Neil Sanapa, who is the senior organizer in Central Coast and Central Valley. Feel free to reach out to us at any time for anything, especially stuff going on in your region. Because I am statewide, you can feel free to reach out to me at any point. I'm happy to talk to folks, here's folks' ideas, anything like that. And then, last but not least, membership. One of the things I want to emphasize here is because we are not in alignment with the main Democratic Party and everything in terms of the wealthy donors and the corporate donors, we really depend on the dues paying of our membership to kind of support our work and get us across the finish line in some of these races, and then support candidates and the electeds once they get into office. And this means that we need to organize our people and our money. one of the ways that you can do this is, one, attend this event and then show up and share this with other folks too if they're interested. We'll be hosting another one in December. But also paying monthly dues. Again, you can pay whatever amount you are able to. If all you can do is $1 a month, fantastic. I mean, every little dollar helps. Like, you would be surprised how much $1 on a campaign can go toward, especially for some of the grassroots progressive campaigns that we're supporting on the municipal level. So if you can only do $12 a year, fantastic. Thank you for anything that you can give, anything you can do to support. But this is how we counter the mass amounts of money that the corporations really funnel to both of the two major parties. With that, we ended a little early. If folks have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I am hoping all the links I dropped worked. If there is anything else, feel free to drop it. Ask in the chat. Again, you have to be a subscriber of the channel to comment in the chat. I hope this went well for folks. This was the first time we were doing this on YouTube. It is different from our normal setup of, okay, we're going to do everything on Zoom. I'm hoping this worked well and that my mic worked and the audio worked and all that. But again, thank you folks for joining tonight. Thank you, Allison, if you're still here, for chiming in on the chat. It's appreciated. But if folks have questions, I will, I don't know, hang around for another couple minutes. If folks have anything that they want to ask about things I covered here, things I didn't cover, things you've seen us talk about, I really encourage folks to get to know us as organizers, get to know us as a party. Thank you again for joining us on this Monday night. I hope everyone's night's going well. It was raining here in the South Bay earlier today, so I hope folks enjoy this weather. Again, I'll just be hanging out here for another couple minutes. If folks have any questions they want to ask, feel free to ask. No issue if you are shy and don't want to ask, if you're figuring out the controls of things. But again, I dropped our Mobilize in the chat for any of the upcoming events, and then I also dropped the link to become a dues paying member. So I hope folks have everything they need. Yeah, I can share out the slides with you, Allison. If you signed up to the Mobilize, then I'll be sure to just email you the slides. Also, this event itself will be staying up on YouTube, so if folks want to check this out at any time or just rewatch it or share with folks to get a debrief and overview of what we are, this link will be up for folks to share at any time, but I'll also get you the slides as well. Any other questions from folks? Comments? Suggestions? Did I talk too fast? I hope folks found this information useful. Okay. Any final thoughts, questions? If not, have a fantastic night, everybody. Feel free to reach out to me at any point. Good night.